Welcome everybody to Wine Wednesday. Got a special treat today. Tao Sweet told me about this company right here, which I will put in the description. And I got all of these wine samples to try. Very, very cool. So I'm going to open them once we get to talking and give them a try because I'm very excited. I got like all these different wines that look really interesting and exciting. So I will definitely let you know what I think of all of them. But first, I wanted to introduce my special guest today, Miss Sher- Miss Cheryl Taylor. Just one moment, please. Oh my gosh. Okay, Lucy, I am muting you. Okay. Uh, and this is why I don't send the link out typically until we are through with the interview. My bad. But I have with me today Miss Cheryl Taylor, who is a breeder at the hobbyist level who's basically gone professional level. So she does things in a lot of ways that are much like a professional. And we had a very long interview session earlier where she covered everything you could ever want to know about breeding. And I have put together a little clip of that video, which I'll show in a little bit. But we're going to talk to Cheryl. We're going to let her answer my questions, Dan's questions, and then your questions. I'll show you the clip. And then following, you're going to get a very detailed video of all of Cheryl's secrets that she shared with me earlier. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel and you'll be able to see those. I do have to do my little shout out here. I don't know if you can see, but I'm wearing my Seahorse Whisperer shirt. These are coming soon. And on with the show. So, Cheryl, welcome to the show. And
Okay.
I'm going to put you up here on the screen real quick. And, okay, so Cheryl, tell me what got you started with seahorses in the first place.
Well, I've always loved seahorses. And when I was in college, I kept them briefly, did not have a lot of success with them. And I actually had a reef tank set up, and a friend gave me a 30-gallon long tank that was cycled. And I walked into the our little bitty local fish store here in Boerne, Texas one day. And I think that was about 2005. And they had seahorses. And so I picked out a male, took one home. And my kids, of course, convinced me that he was lonely. So I went back. I went back and got a female. And that started the entire odyssey of breeding because I didn't realize that at that particular point that they were already a pair.
Gotcha. And so what happened next? I'm sure I can guess.
I had a boatload of fry that I was totally clueless about how to raise.
Right.
And I ultimately went through setting up a series of 10-gallon tanks with hang on back filters on my kitchen counters and rapidly came to the realization that it wasn't working like I had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, I started experimenting with larger tanks. My Erectus tanks, fry tanks, turned into 29-gallon tanks. And then I had set up a number of larger tanks for grow out tanks. And over time, I came to the realization that these guys can produce a lot of fry really fast.
Mm-hmm. And based on what we talked about earlier and based on the video that I will put out soon, um, you were doing the standalone tanks and you just realized that maybe there was a better way to do it. And in a second, I will show a clip of the video that we were talking about earlier. But before we jump into that, because I know everybody wants to know about the breeding, but I want to know a little bit more about you. So when you found yourself in the situation where you had these seahorses and now you have all these fry, what who helped you the most? How were you able to find good information and get to the point where you are today? Who was your biggest motivator? What motivated you?
My biggest motivator and still my mentor is Dan Underwood.
Who is with us today? Hello, Dan Underwood. He wasn't.
Hello.
He was not supposed to be here. He came in at the last minute to help me. But in your opinion, Cheryl, do you think that one of the reasons that you have come so far is because of the fact that you were able to get good help? I mean, a lot of people are in the, I'm sorry, I'll let you talk. A lot of people are in the situation where they have seahorses, now they have fry, and they're like, and this is why we're doing it. But it's so nice to have people like you and Dan. So go ahead and.
Well, I would not be where I am right now and have the kind of setups that I did if it hadn't been for Dan's basically mentoring me for such a long time. And I also joined Seahorse.org, and I joined there in 2007, and there was a tremendous amount of information, and we were learning then, and we're still learning, finding better ways to raise seahorses and to keep seahorses.
Right.
I mean, this is an evolving field.
Yes. I want to say hello to everyone watching. We're still practicing with the Facebook thing, so I can see that I'm seeing your comments, which is cool. But if I'll try to get back to them. I've got Lucy trying to help me out with that also. Back to you, Cheryl. So obviously I'm going to put out the video where you explain what advice you would give to new seahorse keepers and new breeders. But can you just give me a summary of the things that you find most important, because the video doesn't contain all of it? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there's several factors. Most people, and again, it's common in your local fish stores, totally underestimate the amount of space that a seahorse will use. There's still a tremendous amount of misinformation about flow. Seahorses can handle a lot more flow. And, we used to typically say 10 to 20% of the total water volume per hour for your flow rate. And that's higher than some people use on their reefs.
Right.
Other factor, also seahorses continue to grow throughout their lives, and an erectus, a large erectus, can dwarf a 24-gallon tall tank. It's not that it's necessarily going to hurt him as long as he's got additional lateral movement in the tank. Another factor is the bioload that they place on the tank. You ideally really do want to have a very good skimmer rated at least 2 to 3 times the total water volume. And that's also an important factor from my perspective. And from a breeding perspective, they can breed in much smaller cramped quarters. It's not a matter of can they do it. The question is, are they going to be happy? Are they in an optimal environment?
Right. Absolutely. And I'm sorry that we're skipping around, but I do want to show the little clip, just giving a preview of what people are going to see in the video that we put together. So really quickly, before I start it, because it starts off talking about the standpipe and how to build the fry tank. So just to let anyone watching know, there's of course the video coming that's going to show you exactly how a hobbyist level breeder could put together a fry tank and do it basically the way that the pros do it at a smaller level. But just to reiterate before we start, you said that when you were using the standalones, you decided that you were better off using the tubs, correct? Because of the circular motion and.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
They're much easier to clean. You can have a higher stocking density because there's no corners for detritus to collect in. And it takes me a matter of minutes to clean a fry tank now. Whereas when I was fighting with the rectangular tanks, I would spend 15, 20 minutes and still have a messy tank when I was done.
Right. Well, and I'm gonna ask some more questions about you, but just to give people, I'm just very excited about this video. So to give people an idea of what I'm talking about, let me go ahead and play this video. Maybe. Let's see. All right. Okay. So let's see if I can pull this off. One moment, please.
A lot of people that are getting into seahorse breeding are wanting to set up the circular tubs, a small version of what the commercial breeders use that I use. And a lot of people have the question, well, how do you build the standpipe for the filtration? And what this is a 1-inch standpipe into a 1-inch bulkhead on the left side. And then on the right side is the outer sleeve that fits over the standpipe. And if you notice, there's a coupler at the bottom of that sleeve. And I cut out holes in it for the filtration. And ultimately, that gets covered then with either 650 micron mesh or window screen. And I attach it with PVC glue. What I do is on top of the bulkhead, I've got another piece of the 2-inch PVC that is cemented down with PVC glue. And so the coupler fits right onto that tight. And there's no room, you have to be careful, you have to make sure that there's no holes that the fry can get through. The smaller, the micron net works great for very tiny fry, very young fry. But as they get a little older, I switch to the window screen because with the larger holes, it helps keep the nursery much cleaner than it would otherwise. The piece on the right fits over the top of the piece on the left, and that's what allows for the filtration without the fry going into the sun. You want to be able to remove it. A lot of times, as the fry gets a little bit bigger, I have to clean that at least twice a day because with this small micron mesh, it's going to clog up very quickly. Normally, fry have a lot of fecal output, and also with the baby brine shrimp in there, they're getting sucked up against that. In theory, they should all be washing through when you turn up the filtration. However, it does get messy. You can see that. You can definitely see it, and I want to pull it out and keep it clean because I don't want to, when I pull the stand or the sleeve up and remove it, I don't want to get a lot of debris to drop off and back into the tank that I'm going to have to siphon. This is just one of the tubs from the top view. You can see I've extended down some PVC pipe at an angle because I'm trying to create a circular flow in this tub because that's what makes it self-cleaning. What happens is when you get the circular flow and with the drain in the center, over time it gradually moves all the detritus up. It either goes down the standpipe or anything that's too big collects right around the sleeve itself. So basically, unlike like rectangular tanks where you get that detritus stuck in the corners and all over the place, this collects anything that's not being flushed out right around the outer sleeve. And there's an airline that's hooked up in there also. I've had a habit for many years of always adding extra airlines in any of my seahorse tanks. And one of the advantages of this one, and in fact I modified it a little bit, is sometimes at night, if I get the flow a little too high, I can get fry stuck onto the sleeve. And so by putting an airline in there, it gently just moves them off of the sleeve. It does have an extra PVC pipe in there, as you can see. That's coming off of a UV sterilizer.
Because I ran out of time for editing purposes, I will just quickly explain how this fry tub works. Cheryl has 2 pieces of PVC coming in at an angle to create the circular flow. These are fed from 2 separate pumps in her sump, which you will see in a moment. However, the basis of this idea is that she is pumping water through the 2 angled pieces of PVC from her sump, and then waste, anything else, anything bad, goes down the standpipe, which is covered with the mesh screen to protect the fry. It's an excellent system because unlike a large seahorse tank like adult seahorses, fry do need lower flow. And so using adjustable pumps in Cheryl's sump, she is able to create a nice, slow-moving, circular flow that allows all of the waste to collect in the middle where she can easily siphon it out or let it go down the standpipe. Okay, we are back. I'm still working with video processes, but in case you didn't get to see all of it, that was a little glimpse of the coming video that Cheryl walks us through exactly how she takes care of fry at a breeder's level. So let's see, Cheryl. I'm sorry. I'm so flabbergasted at this point. I'm so mad that the video didn't get done. Um, what would you say is the most difficult thing about breeding in your situation?
For somebody brand new to it, it's actually comes down to finding ways to keep the fry alive. And many people get discouraged because they lose fry. I mean, I went through that when I first started working with them. And over time, that was why I started, joined Seahorse.org and why I listened to Dan so much, because this was somebody that was able to give me insights, and all I had to do was figure out a way to make it work on a much smaller scale. It's my toy viewing bowls that I use for nurseries. They're actually just under 20 gallons, but they do the job. And currently I have 2 tubs plumbed into a 29-gallon sump on each system, which enables me to take down one tub and clean it. I can move the fry over to the other tub, and it makes it much easier for me to keep things clean. And with the filtration I've got now, the tanks remain very stable. I don't have to worry when I start feeding mysis. I don't run into the problems of getting spikes in ammonia and nitrites like I used to when I was using the glass tanks. I have room for a big skimmer for a K1 media reactor in the sump. It just maintains much better water quality, and that is one factor I think for a lot of people starting out with fry. They have difficulty maintaining proper water quality.
Absolutely. And because people are tuning in for the breeding and the video didn't work out the way I planned, let's just start with that. So if someone has just purchased their seahorses and they see that their seahorses are courting, what we talked earlier and the video will show it, but tell me again how you know when to start setting up your fry tank, when to start setting up your Artemia. What's your process with that?
I tell people when they're getting a pair of seahorses to set up a fry system at the same time they're cycling their main tank. And I also advise them that they're going to ultimately need a grow out tank for any fry that get larger. So I'm trying to prepare them in advance, because some seahorses, I know I've talked with people, sometimes they have them 3 years or more before they ever get fry. But an awful lot of people I know, they get a pair, and within a matter of months, they've got a pregnant male. And they're totally scrambling. Get the supplies you need. Get your hatching cones. Get the brine shrimp cysts. I mean, and again, it depends. It's going to vary by species. Most people are getting erectus, and they're pretty crazy when it comes to making fry. And it's one of those things, if you're prepared for it and set up for it, it's a lot less stressful, and you have a much higher potential to be successful in raising the fry.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to read what she's saying too. I apologize. Exactly. And so set up right when you're first starting out, right when you get the erectus. Absolutely agree. And what signs tell you that they are starting to breed?
Well, they're going to start dancing. They'll circle together. They'll start pointing their snouts up toward the top of the tank, and eventually they'll start rising in the water column. Once they start rising in the water column, they are going to go for an egg transfer. It's possible with a young naive pair, they may drop some eggs and may not get pregnant the first time, but once that starts, they're not going to stop.
Right. And once a male is pregnant, when do you tell people to start their artemia, their hatchery?
If they saw the egg transfer, they probably ought to look at doing it about 12 days after the egg transfer.
Okay.
The difficulty is you haven't seen the egg transfer. Uh, they could come early, they could come late. You're better off starting the artemia early and having them on hand in case you're wrong with the dates on that.
Right.
Because if you do food, you've got a problem.
Now they can, I know that you told me earlier, they can actually go for what, 24 hours?
Right. The literature and the information I've gotten is they can survive 24 hours without food. And in fact, I've got some that I've raised that went to 24 hours without food.
Gotcha.
It's not ideal, but it's doable.
But so the best bet is, either time yourself very well, or for a new person that's their seahorse is breeding for the first time, the second if you have any way to do it in advance, do it in advance. But if not, the second you see, that you notice he's giving birth or having contractions or anything like that, get that artemia started. And
Well,
go ahead.
the artemia, you can usually start seeing a hatch at about 16 hours. And it's not at all unusual for me if I get caught a little by surprise for me to start harvesting them and then finish off, let the rest of them hatch out over up to 24 hours. So I mean that is one option.
And I won't make you go into it here, but in the video you guys will hear all about how she handles her artemia and all of that. All of the hydrogen peroxide, all of that will be following in the video. But when you have your fry, what are the most important things that you what are the most important things to make sure that the fry do well? Because I'm sorry, let me rephrase the question. When you have your fry, a lot of new hobbyists have fry and then they feel badly because the fry don't do well. Can you explain why the first time seahorses have fry, it might not work out so well?
It's a combination of factors. One, if it's a young pair and they're small, they're not full grown yet, their the brood size is going to be smaller and the actual fry are going to be smaller.
Right.
As they continue to mature, the fry actually are larger and easier to raise. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. What happens so often is people are trying to raise them in very small bowls without filtration, and it becomes a haven for bacteria if it's not really carefully cleaned all the time. It also, your water quality is going to deteriorate very rapidly. And again, another factor is you have to enrich the artemia.
Mm-hmm.
They just do not have the essential nutrients for growth, DHA and things like that they need for fry to grow. So you've got a situation where with artemia, you're feeding a suboptimal or poor quality food. You've got a situation where you're creating a haven for bacterial problems. Seahorses have very rich GI tract. Probiotics can help out in terms of us helping establish the gut flora and also in terms of helping reduce the bacterial load in the tank. However, it's one of those things. There's a lot of pieces to raising fry, and if you get one piece wrong, you may lose them all.
Exactly. I'm struggling a little bit in asking questions, and I apologize to you and to everyone. It's because we talked in depth earlier, and you walked me through your pictures and how they work, and I could not get it thrown together in time. But either way, I'm going to stop saying it, but the video is going to be really, really great and walk through everything. But really, I think that what you're saying overall is that, and making sure that you're getting the best advice from someone, from good sources is important. Making sure that you're paying attention to your artemia and getting the right foods to your fry is important. Making sure you have enough space and a big enough setup is important. And, I think you're still giving the good information that we need to hear. Um, we're just going to keep going with that. So go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, it's like I was talking with some people overseas, and their big thing was when they started losing all their fry very rapidly when they started feeding frozen. And I'll give you 100% odds that this is occurring because they're getting a bacterial bloom, and potential pathogenic bacterial bloom because of the uneaten food.
Right. So cleaning the fry system is seriously important, and making sure that the vessel that you're hatching artemia in, or if you're trying to wean fry onto frozen foods, making sure that you get it all out of the tank is extremely important too. It's
Right.
it's a long process. It's really honestly too much to even try to do in one live stream. So I apologize for not making it more specific a topic, but why don't you just tell me about more of your experiences? How did you tell me that you have some fry right now that caught you by surprise?
Right.
What's going on with those? How did you
Well,
handle surprise fry?
I have some little over 8-month-olds right now that I adopted from a friend of mine that wasn't able to take care of them to keep them. And of course, with my luck, the sneaky smallest male in the group apparently managed to complete an egg transfer. So I got a small brood of fry from him now 3 days ago. I didn't know he was pregnant. I did figure that out. So I had already had the artemia and stuff like that. I want to digress for just a moment. When you asked me earlier about when you should start hatching artemia,
Mm-hmm.
I would advise anybody that's not experienced at it to do some trial runs well in advance to make sure that they know what they're doing and how to do it, and that the cysts are hatching. I will, even if I haven't hatched any in a couple of months, I always go in and hatch some when I'm expecting fry. I always go in and test to make sure the hatch rate is good on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something to think about also. There's nothing more frustrating than to set up a hatching cone, put everything in, you think you've done everything right, and 24 hours later, you've got maybe a 10% hatch rate.
Right. And we talked earlier, and I asked you if there were any specific brands of Artemia that you recommend, but you said they're
Well, generally had good success with the OSI.
okay.
You can get it. I don't buy it in large cans anymore because I found that I didn't use it fast enough.
Okay.
But you can buy smaller packets on that, and I've consistently had good hatch rates with theirs.
Gotcha. And I know we've been all over the board. It's just been a bad week, but I do want to get as many questions, from other people answered as possible. And I'm just trying to, Dan, if you can you think of any questions that I should be asking of Cheryl to help a new breeder? I have the video of her walking us through setting up a tub, but I don't have it for the stream. So I'm kind of winging it here, and this is going to be a very casual live stream. Live is live, and it sucks sometimes because it's live, and we're gonna just kind of chit chat and then follow it up with an amazing video. But so I'm gonna go ahead and just let people ask questions and go from there. Dan, can you think of anything else that I need to cover right off the bat?
The
Cheryl?
biggest I'm thinking of right now is another factor is the way that people enrich and handle the Artemia.
Okay.
They need to be clean because you can dramatically reduce your potential for problems with hydroids if you do it. I personally do treat them with hydrogen peroxide after hatch while they're still in the cone. And then I also treat them again before and after the enrichment process.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole principle, a lot of the problems that we see in fry and basically are bacterial infections in the GI tract. And that's a large part being caused due to the bacterial load of potential pathogenic organisms. If you sterilize the brine shrimp and keep them clean, you're going to have a much better chance of being able to raise the fry.
You know what? Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna do a blah, 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 start over. I'm gonna stop being so nervous, and I'm gonna talk to you like we were talking earlier. The video will come, but we're gonna talk now about what's important. So let's start at the beginning. When people are getting seahorses, you recommend what? Live rock, dry rock? How do you handle your rock situation?
I will not use live rock in a tank. If I, for some reason, ended up with live rock, it will be dead before it would ever go near one of my tanks. And my favorite one was when I first started. I got some live rock from a reefer, and I was sitting watching my seahorses. I'd only had them a short period of time, and all of a sudden, coming out of the rock, since the lights were starting to go down, was this giant crab. It could have killed a seahorse.
Right.
Besides that, there's too much potential. You're going to introduce aptasia. You can introduce hydroids. You don't know what you're introducing. So I start out everything with completely dry, sterile raw.
Okay. And you use, I think you told me you use the ammonia cycle to cycle your media. You put it in
Right.
your tank. And then, what is your quarantine period for anything that goes into your tank, including seahorses, gorgonians, macros, anything? What is your quarantine method?
Like with macro, it gets put through a coral dip, it gets put through a freshwater dip, and then it goes into quarantine for at least 6 months. Because I learned a long time ago the hard way, it's a lot easier to prevent problems than it is when you already have seahorses in the tank.
Gotcha. So 6 month quarantine, and we have discussed the fact that this all depends on your risk tolerance level, and you and I are in agreement that we are zero. We don't have any. We don't risk anything. There are many ways to do things, but a 6 month quarantine has kept you free of any kind of pests for how long?
I don't remember the last time I had to treat. I haven't seen an aptasia in probably 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I just don't even. It's not something I even deal with anymore. Last time I used Panicure for hydroids, it's probably been at least 5 or 6 years.
Okay. And
Uh,
go ahead.
the only problem that I had in nursery was I didn't realize it, but I got some copepods that were contaminated with flatworms.
Okay.
And I moved the fry out and moved them into another system and then bleached that system.
Gotcha. Now, you said the copepods had a flatworm issue in the vessel. Would that have been taken care of with peroxide, or peroxide won't cover that?
No, no.
Okay.
Uh, the thing is, these were so small, the flatworms were so small, I didn't even realize it until I started seeing my fry in trouble.
Gotcha. Okay, all right. Well, so we're building the story here. So you quarantine everything you put into your tank. You cycle your media. You don't use live, and then Erectus are going to have babies like crazy. Is it was the point. And then what your video will do is show people how to set up a breeder tub on a commercial basis. Why don't we go ahead and talk about that real quick? Can you, without having the pictures available, can you just describe how you build your fry tub in 5 minutes, or is it too hard to do without the pictures?
Well, it's a little difficult. Picture's always worth, 1,000 words.
Yeah.
But basically, I drill the nursery tub in the center. I put in a 1-inch bulkhead and a 1-inch standpipe. Then I use a 2-inch PVC. This is all PVC. A 2-inch PVC, and put what's called a PVC coupler on it. And then the coupler I drill holes in, and I cover that for the newborn fry with 670 micron mesh, which I actually glue on using PVC glue. And then for larger fries, I get a little bit bigger. I use nylon window screen on this on these outer sleeves, and then that drains into a sump. My sumps, I typically have very large burst chambers because I want to be able to have a skimmer in there. I want my filter sock, and I want to be able to fit at least a pump, preferably enough room for a K1 media reactor also.
And I can't wait to show your K1 media reactor. Literally, she's made K1 media reactors out of old Coral skimmer. Coral Life, is that it? Coral
Yeah.
Life skimmers. They're so cool. They're so cool. I'm going to do it myself. In fact, yes.
Well, I
Um,
had them laying around, and they'd been sitting there for years, and I didn't throw them away because I kept telling myself, I'll find something to do with this someday.
Right. And that's why I know I keep saying it, but I'm just so excited about the video that I'm making out of our previous interview because you're right, pictures are worth 1,000 words, and being able to show what you're talking about is going to make a huge, huge difference. I think it's going to be one of the best videos I've ever done. But anyhow, um, with with I'm sorry, with the because of the fact that we were supposed to discuss breeding and so on and so forth, um, when you when the seahorses first have the fry, how soon do you start worrying about enrichment and that kind of thing? How soon should that be a factor in what they're doing?
Well, it's going to depend on the species. If you're working with Erectus, they are capable of handling or taking in 24 to 48 hour old. And so what I do is, it's like I've got some more coming in. I'm already enriching 24-hour for feeding tomorrow for the brand new fry. If it's something like reed eye or Cuda or combs or engine, they're not going to be, the fry are not going to be able to, and ultimately your best is going to be Cobalt. However, I would not recommend them at first start a first seed on a terminal.
You were breaking up a little bit. I apologize. Um,
Uh, the species that produce tiny pelagic fry are probably not a good first choice for a brand new keeper, seahorse keeper,
okay.
if they're wanting to breed, because you're going to need to feed them copepods, possibly rotifers. Of course, the rotifers are much easier to propagate, and because they're not capable of consuming newly hatched baby bride shrimp, they're too small in most instances.
And for those that don't know, which of the regularly sold or found in the market species are pelagic? Which,
Uh,
for instance,
that
rectus. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, Erectus dwarfs are both benthic. They produce larger fry. that are easier to feed and therefore easier to raise. Some of the species like Redi and Engines produce very large broods of very small fry. Um, Tomes, the fry typically are a little bit bigger, but again, they do best. They're also pelagic species, and they do best on copepods as their first food.
Okay. And so for anyone new, they need to stick with seahorses that won't need all of the extra little things if they're looking to breed. So rectus,
Exactly.
dwarfs, those are the ones that new hobbyists should go after.
Yeah, it's hard enough getting your feet wet and learning how to raise them. That is a learning curve, and if you add to that a species that you're going to have to be culturing copepods for, you've just really doubled your work.
Right. So easy does it. And we talked earlier about in a normal seahorse tank, I say normal, I mean adult, in an adult seahorse tank, you don't particularly mix in other fish either, for these reasons, because you've got enough on your plate, right? I mean,
Well, I've got on my plate. I don't have a real high risk tolerance when it comes to seahorses, and I have I have been fortunate. I've never completely wiped out a tank, but I don't mix species. If I was going to put something in a seahorse tank, and I see a lot of people doing it, I would probably get myself a captive bred pair of Mandarin dragonettes or something like that.
okay. And so the captive bred means a lot. And then of course you've already mentioned that you quarantine for 6 months. And a lot of people aren't willing to do those types of things, but I personally am right there with you. It just depends on what you're trying to do. But someone trying to breed, definitely, that's important.
Well,
Um,
I don't even mix. It's not even a matter of mixing different species. Uh, I don't mix seahorses from one source or another. In other
okay.
words, I get seahorse from one commercial breeder or a couple of seahorses. Those seahorses are going to have their own tank. And then if I get some from somebody else, they're going to have a separate tank. And each tank has its own cleaning equipment, test equipment. Everything is separate, which
And
means I'm scrubbing my hands a lot between tanks.
right. And I was going to ask because I started off that way, the same exact way where I did not mix even from separate breeders or commercial places. But do you stick with that long term? And I think, do you stick with that long term? You've never mixed? You have
Uh,
never mixed them?
no,
Okay.
I,
Well, I think the message is that again, not only does it depend on your risk tolerance level, but it also depends on your goal. Like if you're planning to breed, that makes a big difference. Like your goal is breeding, whereas someone who's not looking to breed might not have to worry that much. Um,
well, it depends because from my perspective, if I'm going to buy seahorses or bring in seahorses, I don't want to take the chance of causing a problem for them or contaminating what I already have.
right.
Because is I love breeding. I love raising seahorses.
What is it about breeding that I've been asked this question, and I know it's a question that it's hard to answer. But what is it about breeding that just keeps you coming back, even though it's so much work? I know. I go ahead.
That's a loaded question.
I
I
know.
guess the first response is the fry are so darn cute. But I've learned a long time ago that as you're raising seahorses, you really never know what they're going to do next because they're continually learning and changing also. Uh, one of my favorites is I had a canister filter on a 29 gallon and a bunch of really young Erectus fry. This goes back years ago. And one little guy kept trying to cram himself in between the glass and the tank divider. Well, eventually he managed to get through. And the next thing I know, I have a little choo-choo train of baby seahorses all going into the filter side
Oh
of that
no.
tank. They they all followed, the whole darn lot of them followed that one.
Holy.
It's all the silly things that they do. Yeah. The juvenile Combs male that I had, he was down in the spring, he was really hot, but he was still really young. And one female started showing interest.
Hey, Cheryl, hang on. Because for some reason, hang on one second. For some reason, you're breaking up really bad. So let's give it a second. Okay, now start over. Sorry.
Okay, well, another example was a young male that I raised, and he was starting to inflate his pouch, and one of the females was a little interested. She kept on swimming over there and looking at him. Well, they kind of started bumping a little bit, and getting, but they weren't really dancing. Well, he finally got so excited, he grabbed hold of her and was trying to drag her around in circles.
Oh no! Actually, I know one last question, and because I'm not going to keep apologizing. I feel like I've ruined this because you have so much valuable information, but I'm going to make that amazing video. But one question I have to ask, because I want you to tell the story, is do you think that the male or the female picks the partner? When you're talking about seahorses, does the male or the female choose the partner, and what story might you have about that?
Well, the thing is, we know in the wild from some of the studies that have been done that typically the males stake out a territory. And from observations, one was done on Hippocampus whitey in Australia. They found that the females would move between different territories, and depending on the individuals, sometimes if they would go and mate, they'd have deposit their eggs with one male, then they go move off and go to another male. And one female they even observed actually mating with another male that was in the first male's territory. So I'm sure that the males do have some selection. There's been some scientific information about the males tend to prefer the larger females. So I'm sure that there's there's selection going on both ways. In other words,
The story that I was looking for was about your female with the younger male and the pinning incident. Yes, I would like to hear that story really quickly, and then I'm going to ask a couple more questions about your background, and then we're going to open it up for everybody's questions. Go ahead.
I had a female. The person that raised her was a breeder, and she didn't want her anymore because this female would not have anything to do with larger males, which is totally bizarre. But sure enough, paired her up with a little bitty male, and she was in hog heaven and started making fry. Don't ask me.
And when you told me the story earlier, you said that literally, it might have been another story, but you were telling me about the girl just literally grabbed the boy and pinned him to the floor, and it was on.
So that happened. I saw that, and I've seen that more than once in strongly, very older, well-established pairs, where you start getting an interloper trying to come in when that pair is dancing. And I've seen both the males and the females grab the younger seahorse, the younger male that's trying to intrude, and pin them to the substrate.
Right. Yeah. And again, just to let you folks know, because I've jumped around so much, when we talked earlier, Cheryl described the fact that when the males make their territory, which is why it's very important to have, enough room for them to have their own territories. But then the females go between, and it's kind of depends on the personality so much, because some females might like a younger male, some females might like a bustier male, or a buff's the word, not bust. Oh Lord, you know what I mean. They just like what they like, and you can't ever tell. And I was actually thinking of Ray when we were talking earlier, just thinking of different ways that if you're having trouble, if you're wanting to breed and you're having trouble, maybe mixing things up might work, because if they're in a situation where they're not comfortable, happy with the right partner, they won't breed, you know? So it's just completely up in the air. But
Well, yeah, it's one of the things that happens too is there's a lot of if you have several males, young males, in a tank together with females, well, you don't even have to have females. They will go through all the motions and go through trying to establish a dominance hierarchy for breeding. So that is another factor. And what I find hysterical though is like the bride that were born the other day came from the smallest male. Well, he was the only one of them that was not jostling with the big males. He went behind, found himself a girlfriend back behind one of the rocks.
I love it. I love it. I like that male.
And I've seen
Go ahead.
that happen before, where all of a sudden you spot a little small male that's all of a sudden pregnant, and you're thinking to yourself, I never even saw him dance with a female.
I've had it happen myself. I'm with you. Really quickly, just let me ask the last basic questions that I should have asked to begin with. And I will, of course, revamp this video for the actual, restream of it. However, so how long have you been dealing with seahorses?
I got my first seahorse in 2005.
Wow. And
I because it was before my granddaughter was born. She was born in March of 2006.
so that's a long time. How long did it take you before you feel like you were successfully breeding? How many years did it take for you to feel like you were doing a good job?
It took me a couple of years and also a lot of research and reading and talking with people to figure out what I was doing wrong and to be able to correct some of the things that I was doing wrong. And I'll be honest with you, depending on the species, I'm still not always happy with what I'm doing.
So breeding different species entails different things. What is the hardest species you've bred so far?
Engines.
Yeah?
Yep.
I've heard that. Why?
The fry are extremely tiny. The pairs, even a young pair, produces huge broods. So you're getting overloaded with sheer numbers. You've got a species that's very hard to feed. I mean, their ideal food source would be some of the really tiny copepods like Carbocalanus or A. panamensis. But again, culturing in enough numbers to be able to feed a brood of 1,000 Injuns fry is, quite frankly, I've never been able to do it.
That's one of the goals that I have is once I'm better with the streaming thing, I want to bring like maybe you and Dan back on and discuss some of these things, like actually the numbers of the amounts of copepods you'd actually need to feed the fry. It's ridiculous what breeders do, what you and Dan and Alyssa and all of you guys and Lucy, all of you guys do. I started and I said, whoa, this is way more work than I ever imagined. It's a lot of work to be a breeder.
It's one thing too if you live near the sea and you can harvest pods and then screen them out, grade them by size. However, I'm landlocked, and even with my 30-gallon tank, copepod tank, it's got a 29-gallon sump on it, I can guarantee you I can decimate that with one brood of pods, one brood of seahorses within a matter of just a few days.
Yet you've been successful. Can you give me any kind of idea? I know you do not sell to the public, so this is not any kind of sales ad or anything like that. But when you're breeding, you've been breeding for years, what kind of numbers do you experience? Like, how many seahorses do you actually have breeding and that kind of thing?
It varies because I'm just now recently gotten back into Erectus because I adopted those fry, and they're just now really growing up. So I have those. I have the fry from the little guy, and then with this, the thing is with Erectus normally, from my experience, start breeding during the warmer months. My combs start to breed in the cooler months. So they're not doing anything right now.
So it's seasonal. Interesting. I said it's seasonal. Interesting.
Oh yeah, Erectus will usually start shutting down October, November. You'll still get some fry, but they're nowhere near as prolific. And then they'll start back up in about March when it starts warming up again. Of course, there's a lot there's a lot of people that get them off, throughout the entire year, and they're trying to figure out ways to shut them down.
Right, right. I know. But for someone, the thing about you that's so impressive, and I do want to ask about one more question about your background, but the thing about you that's so impressive is that you have succeeded. You are successfully breeding fry at a hobbyist level. I mean, it could go a lot bigger and huger if you wanted it to, but I mean, you have more success than failures, proving that it can happen and you can do it. So I think your story is inspirational, and I will put out that good video. But what was your background before you got into seahorses?
Um, well, my ex-husband and I used to operate a veterinary clinic. He was a veterinarian, and I would do the anesthesia and things like that. And we actually operated an aviary, a cockatoo aviary.
Oh wow.
And so and that was his thing was always birds. So actually, they're beautiful. And prior to that, well, I went ahead and got my bachelor's in zoology, and actually was working on a master's in biology, but that didn't work out due to marital issues. And then during that same time frame, I got involved with publishing for American Federation of Apiculture, and also publishing in some scientific journals with research that I had worked on and co-authored.
Yes, I wanted to make sure you got the opportunity to say that, because I've learned so much from you, and I think that when we get on Facebook and different social medias, people don't realize how much someone like you has put into learning what you're telling. you know, um, you know what you're talking about.
It's a labor of love, above all else. I,
Yes.
I could not do it. I would not be doing it this long if I didn't truly love working with seahorses.
I want to say really quickly, I am watching the messages. I'm trying to. Michigan fan, I'm glad the babies are doing so well. We would love to hear how they're doing for you. And that's another point that's interesting, is that, people have successes and failures all over the board, but the point to someone like Cheryl is that when you learn enough and do things in a certain way, it can be more successful if that's what you want. So, Dan, did you have some questions that I've missed, perchance? Is Dan there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. I didn't hear you say me.
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I just said
Um,
ask some questions.
it's difficult for me to ask questions because I know Cheryl so well.
Mm-hmm.
But what I haven't heard mentioned is, what species are you currently keeping, Cheryl?
I've currently got combs and the rectus.
And what would you say is the difference between raising the fry between the two?
Erectus are easy. uh, Combs aren't too bad, particularly where I've now got good pod populations going. I think a lot of the problem in the past, the combs fry are just at that kind of odd size where they're really a lot of times not quite big enough to ingest newly or 24-hour, 48-hour-old Artemia, and they're way too big to consider rotifers for them, and it's hard keeping up with the pod population from a hobbyist perspective.
They don't have to stay on pods very long, do they?
Now, uh, I want to say usually sometime around 5 days, if even that far out, they're already getting big enough to be able to take the Artemia.
Gotcha.
But it depends. My one pair that I got them in 2012, and they were already large adults. Now they produce some nice big fry. The younger kids, those probably can be a nightmare to raise.
I'm listening to you guys, and Dan, if you have more questions, feel free to ask. I went ahead and put the link up because obviously
Okay.
I went all over the board on this one. I'm not going to apologize again, but I'm going to revamp it for the redo. But I want anyone with questions to be able to ask them because Cheryl is full of good information. You won't believe it. So. Go on, Dan, if you had more questions, or Lucy, or anyone who has questions. Ray has joined. Hello, Ray.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Ray.
Hi, Cheryl. I think I better turn the camera down a bit. I don't have a very sophisticated system here. I
Nope,
do have, whoops.
no, you go ahead. You talk.
No, I was just saying I do everything on the cheap. So I got a little camera sitting on top of my screen here, but it's not meant for that, so I just have to move it. If I bang the table, then the camera moves too. Yeah, I was a little late getting to hear everything you were talking about, Cheryl. I keep forgetting about this. And I come in the house from walking the dog. I think it was about 8:30 at that time, but been listening in since then. I just need to get some seahorses that are going to produce some fry. I haven't been producing seahorses now since I had the erectus. You were saying that
Did you never got your barberries to go, or?
no, I had 9 batches on the barbs. Never got any of them to succeed. I went from there was a batch of 2, and then they progressively got up to, I think it was 65 or 68. I don't remember exactly now, but never got any to survive, and they just stopped producing. Haven't had anything since. And the abdominalis, I had a birthing 6 weeks after I first got them, and 2 days after that, the male died, and none of the others have produced since. So I've been, well, I guess the last erectus that I raised for, that'd be 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago now. And reedi, I haven't been able to get any more reedi. So it's, I can't remember for sure, but probably 7 or 8 years since I was selling reedi.
Yeah, I remember you.
The reedi were the first ones that I ever started with. And I had problems with them too. It was exactly on my 10th batch where I succeeded. And it was only about 40% in that batch. But, and I never got up to Dan's figures, probably because I don't invest the effort into it that he does. But I was running the last couple of batches, 66 and 69% in that range.
That's good, actually.
Well, it's a long ways from Dan.
Well, Dan's, that's the whole point is we're, some of us are on a different ability level, different equipment level. Dan has a facility, whatever. I have a quick question out of the blue, but I'm trying to make sure that the questions get answered from social media. And Amy wanted to know, she said there was a discussion earlier about fry dying at about 4 to 6 weeks old. Do you guys have an opinion about why that happens and how to avoid it? Why do fries die at 4 to 6 weeks old? I have an opinion, but I want to hear yours.
It's a combination. One, a lot of people start feeding frozen during that time frame, and if the fry are not taking it, they don't clean it up, they're going to end up with major problems with bacterial growth. So that's going to be one problem. Another problem, I don't typically see a high mortality. For my mortality, if they get through the first week, I rarely, I'll lose like one here or one there. But it's a combination of possibly what they're feeding. It may be water parameters. Again, you start feeding frozen, and you're risking the potential, depending on your filtration, of ammonia spike, nitrites, and things like that. And Dan's been at this a lot longer than I have in terms of working with people that have had these kind of problems. And he might have a better idea than I do.
Dan, what would you say to people who have trouble with fry dying at 4 to 6 weeks old?
It can be any number of things. It can be something ranging from issues building up from the artemia, from lack of hygienity, not keeping it clean enough, having bacteria build up in it. It can be from poor nutrition. It can be from poor organics buildup in the tank, where you end up with a buildup of bacteria and ciliates or other protozoans. There's a range of things it could be. Trying to isolate which one it is difficult from afar. When I'm looking at a system and watching a system, it's much easier for me to figure out what's going on. And even, you know, Ray, I do have some very high successful numbers, but I also have some tanks that sometimes I don't have that high of a success. It ends up with me bleaching a system and starting over. So it's consistency is difficult. But in the case that I think she's referring to, the a lot of times people will have initial success breeding. Sometimes it's partially luck. Sometimes it's they're just doing everything correctly. And then they run into what I call the proverbial brick wall, where they start having these issues and they need to back up, start back from ground zero and review everything they're doing um, through the whole process. And that's what happens with us is typically when we lose a batch, we've got a little too cocky, made a shortcut somewhere, did something, got off track, and have to go back and straighten it up.
I think my earliest failures were due to insufficient cleaning and not enough feeding. And I think a lot of failures of people buying seahorses today, based on people that I've been connected with around here that have sold seahorses to, or they bought them from one of the stores and that. But I really believe people don't feed enough. I'm not talking fry
Well,
now. I'm
see,
talking
Yeah.
about older ones. I feed them 4 times a day. I guess I cut up Hikari flat packs. I think they're 16 ounce, and I cut them into 48, 32, 128 pieces, I guess. So I'd say they're somewhere between 3 and 4 grams a piece, and I'm putting 4 of them in the tank at a time. That's for 8 barbs, and the other tank gets the same size piece, and that's for 5 abdominalis. But when I see these people talking about they're putting in half a cube, I guess they're talking about the Hikari cube packs. I'm not sure how much is in them, but anytime I've seen them, it sure doesn't look like there's very much in them. And if somebody's just putting half a cube in a day, I don't think that's near enough.
well, a seahorse can eat up to 5 to 10% of its weight per day.
Yeah.
Well, basically the way I got to my stage, you know, with all this being said, this is what I'm doing currently with the barbs. I used to have to feed more than that to the erectus with fewer in the tank. But the barbs aren't consuming as much as the erectus did. Breed consume about the same as what the erectus did, but for some reason the barbs just don't. Now, with the abdominalis, I think it's a given there that because they're a bigger seahorse, they're going to eat more. But mine still are only about, I guess, 7.5 inches long at this point. It'll be a year this month since I got them. But I'm expecting to have to increase as I go on. But I judge by what's left after about 3/4 of an hour when the pumps and that turn back on. I use timers to first of all turn on a pump that is only on when it's feeding. But at the same time, I have another timer that I turn off the return pump and the power head with a filter attachment on it. I use Hagen. They were called 802 power heads and called quick filter attachment. The name has since changed. It's still the same thing, but the name has changed, and I can't tell you what it is. But anyway, I use a timer to turn off the return pump, plus this pump that has the filter on it. And the other timer turns on a pump that I use that's pointing on the bottom to keep the water in motion and try and keep as much of the frozen stuff in suspension as long as I can. After 45 minutes, the timer shuts off that bottom power head, and the other timer turns on the return pump and the power head with the quick filter. And then it runs again that way until feeding time. I shouldn't. The one on the bottom that's on, that I turn on when I turn the return pump off, it also comes back on after about 3/4 an hour and runs again for another 3/4 an hour. And that, the intent for that is to disturb the bottom again and get anything that is settled up so that the filter, which is now on, unlike the first time when the power head come on. I think I'm getting everybody screwed up here. But this bottom one, the second time it comes on, it's on at the same time as the filter is on. So now the Seahorses may pick up a little bit the pieces, but most of those pieces are pieces they reject. But it keeps it in suspension long enough for the filter to get a lot of it out. So I have very little at the end of the day to siphon out. And to get anything that is left, and I should qualify this, I use bare bottom tanks. At the end of the day, the food usually gathers all in one spot. And then I use a small siphon tube to siphon the crap out and into a net that sits at the top of the sump. And so I'm gathering it, and I'm not actually removing any water for it. The water changes, I'm actually only doing once a week. So each day I'm topping up water, but to do an actual water change, I do it usually on Sunday, and I do a tank cleaning. One Sunday I do just a general cleaning with magnets and a homemade device that I use. And then the second week I do a full cleaning where I razor blade the whole tank down. But again, I've gotten off topic now. Basically, I start off just mentioning I really don't believe people feed enough. And I think partially it tells just in pictures that you see where the Seahorses really haven't filled out to what their potential is.
I hate when I see, even my
The other thing, I
seahorses when
also
they
feel
thin.
that getting sufficient food also makes them probably makes them more resistant to any pathogen that they might be faced with.
I
Not
agree
that it
with
makes them immune, just that it'll make them better. They can fight it easier.
Dan. Would you agree
But
with
I
that?
don't have any proof of that. That's my mind, the way it works.
Dan, don't you? I
So
mean,
us fat people are healthier then.
I'm sorry?
So us fat people are healthier.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say that.
but that's okay.
I'm a lot I'm a lot less healthy now since I put on all the weight after my operation. Put on 60 pounds and I've gone downhill since then.
Yeah.
I've never seen you look fat, Dan.
I love how he stopped
I
the
don't know.
room,
Yep.
man. Sorry,
I don't know.
just joking around.
Yep.
I'm sorry. This turned into basic.
Anyway, I see other faces up here, but I'm not hearing any input.
No, I was thinking the same thing there, Ray.
Can you guys not hear me?
Yeah, if you're gonna be on live, then we like to hear if you have problems or if you have answers to problems, or even to hear about your systems.
Well, guess what?
I've got a question.
Actually, I'll let
Oh.
you. I no. I'm gonna let you ask your question in 2 seconds. But I just realized that my mute was mic'd, or my mic was muted, and so I've been talking to you guys the whole time, and you didn't hear me. So my apologies. Go ahead with your question, Aaron.
Maybe that was a good thing.
Hey everyone, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, sweet. So my name's Aaron. I'm in Australia, Brisbane, Queensland. Been keeping seahorses for a while, and I've got a couple of tanks in the shed which I'm trying to breed. But I've got a display tank that's in my house which I have 3 cooters in, 1 male and 2 females. The question I had was around feeding. So I always run a bare bottom as well, and they're captive bred cooters, so they're used to eating defrosted mysis. They have never been fed any live copepods or anything. I was talking in the chat before, but copepods and amphipods and rotifers and stuff are illegal to produce in Australia. There's you can't just go to the local fish shop and buy a bottle of copepods and start a culture, and we can't import them. So my question was around, I'm a nurse and I work shift work. So trying to feed my horses 3 times a day, which is what I thought was recommended, is a little bit difficult. I'm wondering if many of you use a feeding trough at all, or whether you just let the food float around the tank and let them catch it. My seahorses, I think we all agree, seahorses have a pretty amazing snick, but as far as speed of swimming around a tank trying to catch a little bit of mysis, they're pretty useless. So yeah, I was wondering how many people used feeding troughs, and whether having the food sit in there for 3 to 4 hours while they picked out it was a good idea, or whether the food should be digested, or eaten pretty quickly and then refreshed. I probably every day or second day when I'm defrosting the mysis, I soak it in a product called Vibrant. I think it's a Seachem product, and it's full of good acids and amino acids and fats, and it's supposed to kind of enrich the mysis. But yeah, my first question is really around troughs. So I've got a natural trough at the moment. It's just a piece of live rock, or it's live now, and it's got a natural kind of dip in it. And when I turkey base the mysis in, they do stay in there. And the seahorses are used to coming to it. But I just wondered what everyone else was doing. First question.
I'm kind of new to this, but I was thinking the same thing, that I would like to try a trough method. How do you teach them how to do that?
I haven't tried any dish or anything like that with what I have now. But in the past, when I used a feeding dish of any kind, I had a problem with some would eat out of it and some wouldn't. And even leaving it that way for a long time, I end up having to do broadcast feeding for the ones that wouldn't go into the trough. So finally I said, to heck with it. I don't bother with the trough anymore. I just broadcast feed it, and I actually prefer it that way because the seahorses are going and hunting it down more than just sitting at the dish and feeding on it.
Actually, Ray, I was actually going to say, to each their own. I don't think there is a wrong answer to the question.
That's for sure.
Yeah, but in fact, in my personal situation, I have different tanks that have different systems. So in some tanks, I might have a feeding dish, merely because I don't, it's easier to clean. That is a definite plus when you use a feeding dish. If you do have sand, or if you do have a system that's you're not going to have much attention to, then using a feeding dish is a great way to make sure that it doesn't get as dirty as quickly, because you can remove the food easier. It's right there, you know where it is. However, I also agree with Ray in that, in my erectus display, my seahorses are fat and they need the exercise and they need to, hunt and to move around and catch it. So I actually I interrupted because I need to take a 10 second. So I'm going to turn my little camera off. But if anyone else has some thoughts, please share them. Dan, Dan, Lucy, anyone, what do you think about the different feeding methods? And what would you say to a hobbyist? Dan?
Cheryl, you go ahead first.
Cheryl, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I have never used feeding stations, and it's for a couple. It makes it a little easier to clean up, but if you let it sit there for any length of time, it's mice are seafood, and they're going to start going rancid very quickly. Also, seahorses are natural predators. By putting them in a feeding dish, you're reducing their activity level by putting them into just one spot where they have to feed. I broadcast feed. The females, my females are, they'll fly all over the tank to catch the food. Males are a little slower, but and it's just the way they are. But I'm not a big fan of feeding dishes, and I've seen it happen before in other people. You can see a tank, and you can obviously see mice is sitting in there. It's obviously going bad because they haven't cleaned it. It's something that's easy to forget. And that's just my opinion.
Well, would it probably be better for me to broadcast, because I also plan on having other tank mates in there with them, more than likely.
Yeah, as long as the tank mates aren't too fast moving and don't outcompete them for food, you would be fine doing that.
Oh yeah, they're cardinal fish and gobies. I'm not worried about it.
I myself, I could go either way on a feeding dish. I'm not a big fan of the elaborate ones. When I used one, my most successful one was a cereal bowl. What you said before about soaking the mices, I don't recommend doing that. If you think about it, when you soak the mices in that stuff, when you put it in the tank, most of that washes off and pollutes the tank. Um, I strongly discourage it because it doesn't stay on the food, and you're just creating unnecessarily waste in the tank.
Yeah,
Another,
I'd have to agree with you, Dan. Yeah, soaking your
yeah.
food is you might as well dump that in the food, or sorry, in the tank, because you're doing the same thing.
I think we just lost Aaron, didn't we?
Yeah, Aaron left. He's the one that I wanted to get that message to, because he was talking about vibrance or something he was putting into it, and
Right.
I guess it's just food food for the bacteria.
Yeah, I agree with that. That all it's going to do is come off in the water.
The other thing he said with being a nurse was difficult to feed, and I find that most of my customers, it is difficult to feed 3 times a day when somebody works full time. But what most people will do that work a typical daytime job is they'll feed in the morning before they go to work, when they get home after work, and then later on in the evening before lights out. It can be done, and you just have to, you have to live your life, granted, but there's still little ways to work around some of these things.
Yeah, I did that 3 times a day when I used to work too. But now that I don't work anymore, then the 4 times a day I like better. And actually, I've had far fewer problems ever since I've been on 4 times a day.
We feed about every 2 hours.
Oh boy, that's got me beat. I have the computer set here to chime in at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then again at 10, so that I don't forget, because I have a memory problem and I keep on missing feeding. So the computer comes in handy for that with this alarm clock system it has. Now, mind you, there are times when I'm out and I don't hear the alarm go off and I still forget. But for the most part, they're getting it 4 times a day. And as far as live enriched Artemia, I only do that once or twice a week. Usually only once, but occasionally twice a week. And the Artemia that I grow them to full size, not just juvenile. And I enrich them. I still have some Dan's feed here, but for the most part, I'm using. I feed them and grow them on powdered spirulina and Algamac 3050, and so they're always getting that DHA component as they're growing. It's always in their flesh. But on top of that, when I pull out some to enrich to feed them, say on a Thursday or something, then I feed them strictly Algamac, not the spirulina. So that just is increasing that DHA component. I don't feel any need then to mix in the spirulina at that time. And I don't have access to all the ingredients that Dan has to put in his feed. The only reason I have the Dan's feed now, I have used it. He sent me some a long time ago, but a friend of mine bought some when she was down visiting Dan, and she's no longer using it, so she dropped it off here. So I have it to use occasionally. But I keep all the stuff in the freezer, so it lasts a long time anyway. Doesn't go bad on me.
Hey, Cheryl. Really quickly, I wanted to say to Cheryl, sorry to interrupt, but Cheryl, can you move your camera or your computer down a little bit? Not that far down. Just kidding. Sorry. Perfect. You are perfect now. I just want to make sure because I'm gonna redo this. All right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure I get your spectacular face in this. So go on. Answer the question. Sorry.
Okay, well, what was the question?
Sorry, Ray. Go ahead.
I've got a short attention span, so I have no idea what we're talking about other than enrichment of frozen foods, and then I was talking about enriching the Artemia. But I don't remember any question there. I am curious though as to how many people do use live foods for enrichment and how often they might do it.
I like feeding live food that is enriched, and I have access to live Artemia adults anytime I need them. I would prefer to be feeding live mysis, although I still haven't figured out a way yet to grow them fast enough to keep up with the seahorses.
And
I used to grow mysids, but not mysis, and because their cannibalism rate is so high, it's very hard. They don't propagate like Artemia do.
Right.
I have the Artemia. They propagate. They give out live rather than cis. They produce live born rather than cis when conditions are ideal. So I can keep a culture going for a long time, just starting off with a tablespoon of cis, and I end up putting them in a 26-gallon Rubbermaid container, and eventually when they're full size, they start reproducing alive. So I can harvest, if I can keep the density up there and harvest, then I can keep it going for a while. Normally though, being honest about it, I have to keep a second culture going too. When I used to sell the Artemia, I used to sell them through a couple stores here in London, and I can't remember for sure now. I had 5 or 6 of these 26-gallon containers on the go at that time. And when I first start them off, the first week or so, it's not iron-fed exactly how many days. I just feed them on the nano, which again, I just culture. And then I switch them over to the mixture made of the powdered spirulina and Algamac 3050, which I put it in the blender for usually about 3 minutes, sometimes longer if I'm doing something else. Then I keep that in the fridge and just add it to the cultures I do it the same feeding with the seahorses. Every time I feed the seahorses, I feed the Artemia. So that's 4 times a day. Because it's much better to feed them light feedings than heavy feedings. Heavier feedings fall up the container faster and you end up with more bacterial problems. But it takes me a long time to grow them because they're growing usually in the range of 64 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And at those temperatures, they don't grow all that fast. But ever since I started doing it that way, which is just my basic room temperature in the basement, I have very little in the way of crashes anymore. It used to be I'd have
Ray,
bacterial problems. That's Dan.
the mysids are actually real easy to grow. The key is to have a large surface area, and doing a standard tank doesn't do it. But
Yeah.
we put them in when we were doing the dwarfs. We'd put them in there with them, and man, they would just go crazy with population because the dwarfs weren't big enough to chase them down. And
Yeah.
in a round tank that was a big enough area, we were harvesting from it almost, I won't say daily, but on a semi-daily basis.
Yeah. I was using 10-gallon tanks for the main production, and it was basically it was called a mycid generator, and I'm trying to think MBL.
Yeah,
I
Frank
think
Gange actually was the one who designed that.
Yeah, that's what my design was based on, and it was quite handy at separating the Napoli from the adults. The only problem is that I found that I couldn't keep whatever I gathered this week. I couldn't add next week's to it because this week's would eat the next week's one. So I
Yeah,
had
We
so many
You
10
can
gallon.
eliminate that problem entirely.
You
We
wish?
don't even try to. Yeah, we don't even separate them. We keep them all in the same tank. The
But see,
key
I
is
wanted them as
the
adults.
right. No, I understand that, but what I'm saying though is by putting them in with the dwarf seahorses, um, and letting them just take over that particular tank, having a large surface area, the amount of food that we were putting in for the dwarfs was the same thing that the mysids would eat.
Yeah,
So if you keep them loaded up with food, they don't cannibalize each other until they start getting hungry and there's no food, then they're going to eat each other, plain and simple.
well,
Hmm.
that population gets too dense, they're going to actually stop reproducing for a period of
That's true, and that's why we would harvest on a regular basis. And the whole purpose of it was to have those so we could harvest them. And what it's like when we start a fry tank, I like to put a handful of them in there to start with, and that population will expand up until the point to where the seahorses finally figure out that they're food, and then you're watching these little guys run around here.
I
I can't
love that.
imagine. I can't imagine what would be in their mind if they could think, but they're running all over there like a chicken with its head cut off, and the seahorses chasing them.
Well, my favorite is watching them, where if you have any mackerel in there, like calupra, one of them will tear off a piece, and all of a sudden the chase is on. Everybody's wanting the same piece of mackerel. There's plenty of mackerel, but they don't know it. They just want that one piece that the one license has.
For me, dwarf tanks wouldn't have been able to produce enough for what I was using though. Like I had so many of these reef tanks. This is before I got into seahorses. Like I had a couple 90s, a couple 75s, 65, a bunch of 55s, and a bunch of 40s, and to have enough to keep feeding those tanks, I don't think I wasn't into seahorses at the time, but when I was keeping dwarf tanks, uh, I can't see even if they weren't cannibalizing I can't see even enough to feed a 90-gallon tank.
My favorite shrimp, in some respects, they're actually white shrimp. They call around here. They call them ghost, saltwater ghost shrimp.
Yeah.
And I put some in a tank. They were big enough that the seahorses did not manage to. They're big enough or smart enough, because you'd never see them. The only way I knew that they were still alive was when I'd see the nepli or when I'd see the molt.
I actually was going to ask that because we're talking.
I've never seen peppermint shrimp do that, but some shrimp can be rather aggressive in doing that.
Yeah.
Well,
It's not the first time I've heard of that.
my peppermint shrimp are like this big. No joke. I'll take a picture sometime. They're just huge. They have babies all the time. But and I had a cleaner shrimp in there, but it was doing the same thing. They would literally like hound the males. But I mean, that's totally off the subject. We're talking about something
Yeah.
else. Sorry.
Well, I can completely understand the cleaner shrimp. I had cleaner shrimp in all my tanks, and well, other than Seahorse tanks. But with the way they would pester fish, some fish enjoyed the attention, a few didn't. But that didn't bother the cleaner shrimp. Whether they wanted to get the fish wanted to get clean or not, the shrimp was there and going to do it whether they liked it.
Absolutely. But I mean, and I did not mean to distract because we were talking about feeder shrimp, which are typically much smaller and not going to be an issue. It was just interesting for me to hear Cheryl say that she's seen them go to the top and wait for fry. I had a really quick question from Facebook. They want to know what is the best live feed to enrich adult brine shrimp. Cheryl, do you want to tell us what you use to enrich adult brine shrimp? Or brine shrimp, period. What do you use to enrich?
I use Dan's feed. I have a combination. I haven't got the probiotics at this point because I've got some other, but I like the immune booster, alternate the immune booster and regular formula.
I'm sorry, one moment. Okay, go ahead. She cut it off. You
Okay,
said
yeah, I alternate with the immune boosting formula and the regular formula that he has.
and that's what I use also. I use Dan's feed. I have the immune boosting, I have the probiotic formula. They work very well. And if you call the breeder, such as Dan or someone else, you can get an exact feeding schedule on how to make that work. But it was a question, so I wanted to ask it. So, Dan, you're the Dan behind Dan's feed. Which feed is the best, and which should you use when?
Yeah, I happen to know the guy.
Some
It depends
people have
upon the
all
application. It really depends upon the application. You know, my preference, what I use is the one with the probiotics. The the version without the probiotics, the immune boosting formula, I've dropped. The only place that sell that now is Europe, because I can't ship them the probiotic version. The formula without the probiotics has vitamin C in it, and that you really don't want to add probiotics to, because the vitamin C is going to counter the bacterial growth from the probiotics. There's been some testing done, and vitamin C will basically make it a moot point to add the probiotics to it. So you either use the one with the vitamin C or you use the one with the probiotics, and I find that the probiotics are a big benefit.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Got a secondary question here that I have from my Facebook stuff. Somebody was, I guess, got a pair of seahorses, and literally their male gave birth. And they're asking, what on earth did they feed the babies? What do you feed baby seahorses, guys? I have no idea. Is it just rotifers or?
first.
Wait, before anyone answers, I just want to make clear this is why I'm going to start doing follow-up videos, because we live stream, and depending on who comes to the live stream, the people involved are at a different experience level. And I want to make sure that these streams end up helping people at all levels. And so, you know, I thank you, Craig, so much, because I should have backed up and let Cheryl cover what you feed baby seahorses. If someone has just had baby seahorses, I want Cheryl to please answer first. Cheryl, what do you feed them?
For Erectus or the larger benthic species, I feed them enriched, basically usually about 48-hour-old Artemia. And I start enriching them after 24 hours, roughly. Again, they can hatch at different times. And I put enough in an enrichment container to feed for an entire day. That's what I do. So I have multiple enrichment containers going all the time. With that, the key, though, to feeding Artemia to seahorses is sterilization. Because if you don't clean them up, if you don't use the hydrogen peroxide, you're risking getting hydroids. You're risking getting, what am I thinking of? Different types of algae. You're going to have potential bacterial blooms. It's just, they are not a real clean food source.
And Cheryl, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you have just gotten a taste of what it's like to deal with people on different levels of experience, because many people who just watch what you said won't know what Artemia is and won't know what the heck you're talking about. So I just want to very quickly, and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but I want to very quickly say Artemia is the exact same thing as brine shrimp. You can get the brine shrimp eggs online almost anywhere. You hatch them, and what Cheryl is talking about is if you want to actually be extremely successful in breeding seahorse fry, then you need to take these things into consideration. She's absolutely correct, right on 100%. But for someone that just is starting out, get some brine shrimp eggs and then wait around, and Cheryl's video will be out within a day or two, and you can watch it and see how to take care of the eggs. But go on, Cheryl, I'm sorry. Go.
Yeah, it's a matter of when I'm getting ready to feed baby brine shrimp or hatching baby brine shrimp, the first thing I do is I add hydrogen peroxide to the hatching cone before they ever leave the hatching cone. From there, they go into a larger container. Basically, it's a holding container. And at approximately 24 hours old, I move it enough to feed for a day into separate, smaller containers where I add the Dan's feed, the enrichment for them. Then what I do is before they're fed again, when I take them out, I think Dan, maybe you're doing it a little different, or maybe wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, you're cleaning the
Not that you're wrong. I do it different.
Yeah, you just sterilize them before the enrichment.
There are many.
Yeah, what I do is I take the cone down. Yeah, there's different ways to do things, but my process is really I take the cone after separating. I take the cone down, then I put them in another vessel, and then I add peroxide at a high rate, and then I let them soak in that for 5 minutes.
Right.
Then during that process they'll separate again, and then I'll take them out of there, rinse them, and then put them in with the enrichment.
Now, what Cheryl, I'm just going to reiterate because Cheryl did go through all of this with me earlier, and I feel very badly again that it's not displayed, but the video will show that Cheryl was describing earlier a process in which she does very similar things. For instance, after the Artemia are hatched, she uses peroxide. Then with a sieve, she rinses them, puts them into a grow out vessel. Then she takes enough for the day, puts them into an enrichment vessel, then peroxide again, and into the seahorse tank. It's a very complicated process, hard to describe without pictures. And the bottom line is, again, for someone who literally barely knows how they're taking care of seahorses, and now you've got fry, just get some brine shrimp eggs, learn how to hatch them, look up how to hatch them, or watch the video in a few days, and then we'll take you through the process on getting better at it. Chances are with your very first seahorse fry batch, as Cheryl pointed out earlier, chances are it's going to be a smaller batch anyways, because seahorses have larger batches and stronger batches as they grow. So don't beat yourself up if they, aren't perfect. Just try to hatch them some food, which is brine shrimp, and we'll go from there. Go
Yeah.
on.
Actually, it sounds complicated when I describe it because there's several steps. But after this long, it's almost automatic. It's probably the easiest part of raising a fry is just treating them with peroxide, not the fry, the brine shrimp.
I actually, when I'm hatching the cysts out, I first of all I hydrate them, and then I put bleach in and run them for a while, but not decapping them, just bleaching them.
Mm-hmm.
Then I do I rinse them well, and then do the regular hatching. And when I harvest the hatch, I do 5-minute run with the peroxide in it then. And for me, um, I've always grown out enough to last me a week or so on feeding. I found that if I have I try to time the hatch so that it comes at the same time or just before the fry come. Sometimes they screw me up a day or so, but I get it pretty close. And so they obviously can handle uh, the 2-day-old enriched Nepali, but I also find that the Nepali are slow enough growing and the fry are fast enough so that 7 or 10 days in, I'm not having to start a new batch of Artemia. The seahorses are able to take it. Now, I never did try that with the redye, but with the erectus, I had no problem.
I just want to say very quickly, anyone who's watching this and feels a bit confused, what you need to do is go on Facebook to Seahorse Sources group. I can put the link in the description. You also need to go to Seahorse Keeping Made Fun. Those two groups, if you have questions like this, people like Cheryl, Dan, Ray, all of these people are there and will comment on your questions and explain what we're talking about in depth. I can't ask every single person to explain what they mean. I mean, we're talking about bleach, we're talking about peroxide. Just know
Yeah,
that
I was kind of that
I'm
why they would use bleach or peroxide to hatch maybe brine shrimp, or am I missing that?
well, it's
You're
a
not,
Dan, you answer.
it's not to hatch, it's to sterilize.
The
Um,
Okay. Oh,
The big problem is
right.
that there's a difference between someone who's just had baby seahorses for the very first time and someone who's trying to become a breeder or trying to breed them on a different level. And I'm thinking maybe I might even break up this stream into different things, or I'm not sure, but I don't want to confuse anyone, and just know there are answers out there, and people, we will help you no matter what. So you just keep coming back, and if you don't understand, get in here and ask a question, or come to our groups and ask a question, because we want to help. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just gonna say the purpose of it was for sterilization. For a newbie, just starting off, your first goal is to figure out to get the little buggers to buzz around in the water, get them hatched. Um, you need to take it a step-by-step process, and the sterilization will come later. I will be eventually putting an article up on the sterilization. My hang up right now is getting the pictures to go with it, but I have most of it written out because of the manual that I'm writing it for.
Yes,
I,
Dan's feed
sorry,
will be much more popular soon. Go ahead, whoever was talking.
no, I was just mentioning that I like to peroxide after I enrich as well. Um, it's my thoughts that the enrichment culture is also rich for producing bacteria. And
Well, actually,
bacteria that can be
actually,
airborne. Sorry, Dan.
you're you're correct, Ray. In fact, there's studies that show that the bacteria will start populating in the enrichment at around 6 hours.
That
There are
bad.
some people that there's some people that take the approach that they take it down in 6 hours, they can avoid the problem. But if you're using probiotics, you put bacteria in there, and basically you're putting the good stuff in there to beat the bad stuff, and it's pretty darn effective. I mean, if you walk into my Artemia room, you don't smell Artemia. Um, when I go into a place, the first thing I notice is when I see Artemia is sometimes I know it before I see it because I smell it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good sign. Your Artemia shouldn't have an odor. Your enrichments will, but the Artemia itself will not. And if I go back there and smell Artemia that smells, you know, where I can smell the actual Artemia, I'm gonna be pouring it down the drain.
I have a question very quickly, Dan, because Cheryl actually uses peroxide, and I'm not trying to speak for you, Cheryl. Sorry, but because I'm doing the video, I know what you're going to say. And she does the peroxide after the enrichment, but she
Which is
doesn't.
fine.
Well, I was going to say she doesn't use the probiotic Dan's feed yet, and she doesn't use probiotics yet. So,
Well, there,
No, I
there,
use
there,
probiotics.
oh, you do? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
there was a study done on aquaculture that was put out, and it's a study that you can download. It's freely available.
Let's link
But
it.
in their testing,
Let's link it in the
that's what?
description. I just said let's link it in the description. Remind me to do that. And I'm sorry I interrupted. Go ahead.
That's right. In the study, they found it really didn't make a big difference whether you did it before enriching or after enriching.
Hmm.
They found that the reduction in bacteria was virtually the same. I like doing it before the enriching with the thought process that if there's any bacteria in a culture, I want to get rid of it so there's no bacteria going into the enrichment. But I'm using, something that I do that's different than everybody else is I actually put the probiotics in the hatching cone while I'm hatching.
Not different than me because I do it too because you're my mentor. But the question is it okay? So when you're done enriching, do you then just rinse it in a sieve and feed? Is that the next step for you?
For me, myself,
Or what you would tell someone to do?
yeah, either feed it out or refrigerate it.
Okay. Okay. I was just curious. And Tina, how lost are you?
I'm not lost. I'm just paying attention.
Awesome. That's what I wanted to hear. I just want to make sure it's not getting too confusing. Cheryl,
No.
were you speaking? I am sorry if I interrupted.
One thing that I read into with someone on Facebook is they suddenly had a massive die-off frog, and they posted a picture. And my immediate response is, "You've got a massive biofilm." Well, that's when the individual turned and looked at his baby brine shrimp, and he realized they were covered in biofilm. He actually introduced the biofilm into the nursery off of the brine shrimp, and he lost them all.
I did the same thing. Go on. What would you say in that case? If you figured out that you had an issue with brine shrimp, you just dump it, right? I mean, or would peroxide handle that?
I wouldn't even go there. When you've got the kind of biofilm he had that had spread to his nursery, I would dump them.
Because I know that's how actually we became friends, Cheryl. For anyone watching, is that I made a very stupid mistake like that and had a biofilm in my fry tubs. And Cheryl helped me figure out what it was and how to deal with it. So thank you very much. But it did most certainly come from Artemia or brine shrimp. So
I didn't know that was you.
it was me. Not recently, but yes, you've helped me with that too.
Months ago is this one.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, for anyone new watching, it's very important to make sure that you get your Artemia or brine shrimp clean. So make sure you're cleaning the vessel is the most important thing. The video will be out soon, and we'll talk more soon. And join these groups so you can learn more. But you guys go ahead and keep chatting. In fact, I'm gonna let it go for a few more minutes, and then I'm gonna take it offline and start some editing because I just wish this had gone better. But go ahead and ask was there any questions from Facebook or YouTube, Reefer Madness or Lucy? You can type and I'll read them if you have them. Otherwise, go ahead.
Not that I could see. I got the one that it happened to be one of the groups I'm involved with on the reefing side, and that came up. So
Okay.
I basically just threw everything and said, go see these people, talk to these people. So don't
Well,
listen to Steve Nutter.
and this is the advantage to one of these situations is that, you know, I can do videos that show explicit, detailed information, but this is the opportunity to come in here and say, here's my tank, here's my problem, you know, help me with it. And a lot of times we get to talking and we're not sure who's watching. So if you have a specific question, come on in here and ask, you know? Okay, she wants to say, asked, can you sterilize with RO water? I'm guessing she means the Artemia. Would that work? Would RO water work instead of hydrogen peroxide?
And
Cheryl.
what do you clean the vessels with? She asked as well.
Cheryl, can you hear me?
I actually, I don't know the answer to that question. In terms of sterilizing the vessels, well, so I generally use hydrogen peroxide on them. But as to what she's asking if this would work, I do not know.
I would
Well,
personally say no, but let's hear what Dan thinks.
RO water is not going to sterilize anything. It's going to help rinse it off, but that's not going to be good enough. And as far as the vessels go, I actually use dishwashing detergent followed by peroxide.
also, if you're using RO, depending on how much how often you're using it, bacteria grow within the filters themselves, in the DI canisters and in
Yep.
the carbon part, and in the startup one that filters out the original crap before going through the rest of it.
Mi-
So
Michigan,
definitely it's not going to sterilize anything.
I'm sorry. Michigan fan wanted to know if any of you used heaters in your displays, breeding facilities, anything.
I own a heater. I haven't used it.
And if you did use it, what would you need to make sure of if you used it?
You would have to cover it with a heater guard, or either that or put it in your sump, so that the seahorses won't hitch to it and burn themselves.
I have a heater in the barb tank, mainly because I turn the air conditioner down to 15 at night. And so that gets the water a little bit too cool for me. Normally the water's sitting around 73, 74 Fahrenheit, which would be, I'm guessing, what, 22, 22, 23 centigrade. My mind doesn't work too well without being able to sit and calculate. So,
I
but
can't.
anyway, at nighttime it does get too cool. So I have that, and I use a simple thing like gutter guard. You know, they use it for keeping leaves out of eaves troughs, and I coil that around and put a zip tie around, plastic zip lock thing, tighten it up, and once I've got it done like that, when I clean the tank, I just slide that off because algae grows in it, and I pressure spray it and brush it with a brush, shove it back on again, and fine. But
Okay, so
I do need
that's a good idea for me then, because I've been wondering what to do with my heater, because I don't have a sump at this point in time. I have just the Jaeger heater to eat.
Tina, I want to say that we can have the.
Jaeger or Jaeger over a foot long. But now what I've noticed that when I turned it down to 74, my tank is staying at 74, but I have not seen the heater kick on at all. And I've sat there and watched it for hours. So I think because of me being in the basement, it's fully finished or whatever. So I'm in the lower level of my house. I think it stays cooler. And so I'm not sure it's kicking on.
Hey,
When I
Tina,
touch it, it's warm. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I certainly didn't mean to interrupt. That's the other hard part about this streaming thing is that I don't know when someone else is talking or done. But I was going to say, in my case, I don't have a single heater in a single seahorse tank, sump or not one. I live in Indiana. The temperature goes up and down. I keep my central air at 74 or lower. And, we humans adjust to it for the seahorses. And my tanks stay anywhere from 70 to 72. They can go down to 60s. You don't want, the worst thing that can happen is a temperature swing, meaning, oh my gosh, it's 80 and then it's 60. But they can handle lower temperatures are always better because that slows down the bacterial growth of the bad stuff. So
Okay, but would my fish be able to handle that? That's the thing. I'm putting other fish in there with them.
Dan, I'm gonna let you, or Cheryl, I'm gonna let you. Well, Cheryl can't handle this because Cheryl's like me, and we don't do other fish. So, Dan, if someone wants to have fish and seahorses, how can they? What's the goal?
Near with this, Kelly.
What?
Well,
Oh,
I said I want to buy a Pioneer because I've heard of a lot of other people using other fish and stuff in their tanks with the seahorses.
yes,
That's the main reason why I'm doing it, to help down on.
and you're not wrong, Tina. You're not wrong at all, and I don't mean to make it sound that way. And that's why we're doing this, is so Dan can explain it to us and other people can have conversations about it. People do things differently. There is no wrong way. And the more that seahorses can be kept with other fish, the better they'll be sold and they'll be happy in aquariums. I just, Cheryl and I breed seahorses on a hobbyist level. So that's the difference. So
Yeah,
Dan,
I breed.
well, before I answer, Cheryl, you want a shot at it?
I want to have.
I'm sorry?
Do you want a shot at the question?
Well, first of all, most of the warmer temperatures that fish are kept at does not necessarily reflect their habitat. Many of the reefers I know keep their tanks very warm because of the corals. Secondly, seahorses typically do better in terms of their overall health at cooler temperatures. Now, my tanks I live in South Texas, it gets hot here. And I actually use cooling fans on my tanks during the summer months to keep them below 72 degrees. In the winter months, when they get down to 68, I don't even think anything about it. Seahorses are happy, they're moving, they're active, they're feeding.
Okay. Yeah, see, I have gorgonians and sponges in there as well, and a toadstool. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can show you guys. I'm going to turn these lights on because I just got my gorgonians and stuff today. So.
hey Tina, as you're showing us, I'll say I have gorgonians also in many tanks and I don't do heaters, but go ahead.
All right, hang on just a second.
Ooh, it's looking good. It is looking good.
It's all ready for the babies. Let me see if I can go see here.
Hey Tina,
Yeah.
I'm requesting right now, when you get your Seahorse Source babies, we need to do a special live stream featuring their arrival, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's their arrival and they get here during the day, I'm not going to be able to do a live stream unless somebody's here to help me.
I'm coming
There we
over.
go.
I'm coming over. No, I'm kidding. But
There we go. What do you guys think?
I think
Not too shabby. My first one, huh?
I think it looks great. I
Tank
Like
tank
that
looks
better
great,
than the
but
plastic crap in there.
the tank looks great, but the heater has to be covered or removed,
yes.
Okay. Even if it's not coming on.
Nope.
even if it's not coming on. Because I'll tell you why. When a seahorse hitches to a heater, it becomes a hitching post to them. And should it come on, the natural reflex from the animal is not to let go, but to tighten its grip. And as a consequence, it ends up with a severe burn. And I get
Okay.
probably 3, 4, 5 of those a year, during the winter months where people have heater burns with their seahorses.
Can
Absolutely.
I put a piece of like plumbing PVC around that?
You won't
You
get the
keep,
flow.
yeah, I was going to, yeah, Cheryl's absolutely right. Getting flow through there is critical. You need a screening type material,
Oh,
or
cutter
try
guard.
to find a heater guard that fits that particular unit. I take it you don't have a sump, correct?
Not in this tank. No, I have a, let me turn on this light here. I have an Aqua Clear 110.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, Aqua Clear 70. And then I have a Bubble Magus QQ1 skimmer.
Well, if it was me, I'd put 2 small heaters in the back of that hang on the back filter.
Oh, good idea.
There's no room.
Yeah. The only other thing I can think of is the plastic needle point mesh. You could actually build a guard out of
Yeah,
that.
I'm just going to say build a guard out of the plastic. It's not needlepoint. What the heck do they call it where I am? Cross stitch. Yeah.
May I ask? May I ask though why she needs a heater at all?
She doesn't, from what you guys are saying, but if she wants it there as peace of mind, just in case the temp dips.
Okay.
The problem is, in my experience, when heaters fail, they fail on.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't I need to have that in there for the corals and the other fish? That's
Tina, are you Tina, are you covering your volume? Are you
Yeah,
covering
she
your
is.
mouthpiece?
no, not really. I didn't think I was.
Okay, you were. Go ahead. You're doing it again.
Don't I need to have a heater in there for my corals and my other fish?
I would say no.
I would say no also.
What do you keep the ambient room temperature at during the winter?
During the winter, we are at, I want to say, now the basement's cooler. The basement does not get as warm as the upstairs does. We keep our heater upstairs at 72 or 74 in the winter. And then it's 78 during the summertime with the air. But it does not get that warm downstairs. So it stays nice and cool down in the basement. That's why my tanks are down here.
Right. And
So that
what
they
would be
don't
the low?
overheat.
Right. But what would be the low temperature in the cellar during the wintertime?
I don't know. I know my heaters kick on.
Right. Right. Well, they should if it's set at 74 and your thermostat's set 70, 72 upstairs and it's cooler in the basement. But
Mhm.
the tank can get down to 69, 70 without a big problem. If I was going to keep the heater, I would probably have it set at around 69 or 70.
Okay.
But you have to remember, it was pointed out earlier by Reefer Badness that these heaters often, the thermostats on these things are cheaply made. They often go. And if I was going to keep a heater in the tank, I'd only do it if I had it hooked up to a controller.
Okay. Which I don't have.
I'm
So
almost
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead, Kelly. No.
I'm sorry. I was going to say I'm almost wondering if a better idea instead of putting heaters in every tank wouldn't be to, if you're worried about it, to get a heater for the room, like one of those, but go ahead.
Space heater.
Yes. Go ahead, Craig.
That's what you're
Sorry.
talking about. Okay.
Well, there's that, or she can get what's called the Cobalt Neotherm heater.
Mhm.
It's a little more expensive.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and spend $140 for a heater. No, I don't have that kind of money.
140? No, wouldn't be that much. Not for that size tank. You'd probably be spending about $70, and it'd be worth every penny because the
Okay.
degrees would never knock off more than 0.5. What I mean, like that's what I'm spending my money on next. Is I may be taking down my 120, but I'm just going to throw the money into my 20-gallon.
Okay.
And that's the first thing, that heater. I'm not kidding. I am that sold because literally the controller's built in. It's made out of plastic, right? You could guard it much easier because it's flat versus a round glass tube.
Yeah, I was checking them out, and I think the one that they were saying for the size of because I'm looking forward to the next tank.
Right.
Because I'm looking to make sure I have a sump. I need to have somebody drill my tank. And I'm looking for like you were saying, the neotherm, but that's going to be in the sump. It wouldn't be in the main aquarium anyway. It would be in the sump.
But where you're in Michigan, and Indiana, it's very rare that I would think you'd need it, right? Because your temps probably aren't going to swing much more than 72 degrees. Just ambient temperature in the room. But we all like our room temperature, right? Which is about what these guys are requesting, I guess, or requiring, I should say is a better word. So in all honesty, you probably don't need a heater in there, like Dan's saying. You just don't. But if
Okay.
you, for peace of mind, want one, get the best one that isn't going to injure those things either, right?
Okay.
'Cause-
Yeah. Well, I don't want them hurt. That's for sure.
I take out the heater.
Yeah, I'd
Oh.
just take it out. Yeah, right. The
All
fish
right.
are going to be okay. They're not going to, the problem you're having, and I know where you're talking about, is the coral. I don't know what gorgonians want. You'd have to look that up and really look into it. Are they a 78-degree coral, or can they handle 72, 74 degrees?
My gorgonians all handle my
There you go.
seahorse temperatures just fine. I can't guarantee you anything, obviously,
How do
but
I tell what temperature my basement is, though?
Go to Home Depot and buy a thermometer for your room.
not just
Thermometer
not,
with a humidity thing on it.
Yeah, get
Humidity.
it all. Just might as well
They're
know.
$10.
Yeah.
$10, you get an electronic thing that shows you the temperature and
Okay,
humidity.
my husband actually has one of those.
There you
So,
go.
all right.
not
Too much of my chagrin.
no
And I'm
no really.
right.
I love this. This is
Ow.
this. I think she left me, but this.
No,
No, I'm right here.
Okay, I was gonna say this is the point that I want people to see. That once I'm done with my spiel, which will be better from now on, with people like professionals like Cheryl sharing good information, then people can come in and show their tanks and ask questions. You're awesome, Tina. You're helping me show people how to do this. So thank you. But yeah, with the other thing I was gonna say is with the gorgonians and with any kind of coral, my personal, not professional advice is watch them, because I know based on watching my gorgonians whether they open up or not, whether they feed or not, whether I know if something's wrong.
Oh,
Yeah,
She
I-
took out the heater. She took out the heater.
no, I just panicked because I just remembered she said it wasn't coming on. Yeah, you don't do that with heaters.
I'm so proud of you.
I had it turned down.
Yeah,
Good.
Good.
I
I
had to-
panicked for a second because I've seen people do that and seen the crack go off, and I'm like, well, there you go. There's $30
Yeah,
in
I had
the
it
drain.
set to 72 and it was saying 74 in my tank. So it's
Yeah.
set lower on here than it is in the tank anyway. So
Those
just-
thermostats aren't worth a darn.
Nope.
it wasn't coming.
I can tell you this. I think Cheryl will agree with me, is that, during our years on seahorse.org, we had many seahorse keepers that were also people who kept corals or reef keepers. And most of them found that they could keep their corals down in the 72, 74 range without an issue.
Mhm.
They would grow a little bit slower, but if they're acclimated properly down to that temperature, they do just fine at the cooler temperatures.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gordon should be fine on that. Remember,
Yeah. Heat kills coral faster than cold ever killed a coral. So
that's the same for seahorses.
there you go. Secondary question. I have another question, and it's a question that Tina asked me the other day, and I'm remembering it. Does anybody have any problems with acans and seahorses? Are they too stingy?
Those are a stony.
They are a type of they're an LPS.
Yes.
It's
And
very.
they do-
I'm
They're
gonna.
active eaters.
I'm
They're
gonna.
active eaters.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say before she even answers, you have to understand that the deep down seahorse people, the ones that have been around for years and years doing this and caring and trying to figure out these seahorses. I'm trying in this stream and in this channel to bring us all together to learn from each other and help each other, but we have to understand that it's, even myself, it's hard for me to hear. I wouldn't, it's hard to hear that people are going to do things that could cause trouble. And now I'm going to let Cheryl answer, but just understand that it's difficult. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, I actually have talked with Kevin Benzel, who's also on the org. He's also on Facebook, and he's a seahorse and also extremely knowledgeable in different types of coral. Now, they are not canes are not generally particularly aggressive. The only concern would be because they really don't move around a lot. They're not an aggressive coral.
No,
The only potential problem would be if something upset the coral and it sent out the sweepers.
I don't ever see sweepers coming out of the A cans. I see
Yeah,
feeder
you would. Yeah, you wouldn't
but
see
I've
them.
never
It'd
seen
be at
sweepers.
night. You'd have to go look at night, Tina.
Yeah,
I do, and I have never seen sweepers come out of these corals.
I have.
Out of an A can.
Yes.
Yeah, no, out of an A can, yeah, I have too as well. Right? It really depends if anything's ticking them off. But if you've been lucky, see, it's all about luck too. Right? So if nothing's making that coral angry, that's not going to happen. It's going to be that time you don't want it to happen, that all of a sudden you look in there and, oh, not only does it happen, but the seahorse is wrapped up in it. Now he's in trouble. That's the problem.
Okay.
So the
Okay.
real answer is if you want to be completely sure that nothing bad happens, don't put them in. But
You got it.
if you know, but the chances are good that you could get away with it for a very long time. So
Anthids and mushrooms and toadstools are okay.
Cheryl,
yes.
Not all mushrooms.
Dan.
Well, it's no different than the reef stuff when they're doing it.
Okay, right here, Dan. You just been thumped.
Yeah, anyway.
Why, Dan? Why not all mushrooms?
I don't know because I don't know a lot about coral, to be honest with you. This is a case where what Cheryl was saying, if Kevin was here, I would completely defer the question to Kevin.
I
was gonna
asked.
say,
I want to
I've
say
had
in
several
case
people tell me that mushrooms are okay.
I
Most of them are.
Most of them are.
I
Well,
asked
that
Kevin to come. Kevin didn't come. Kevin, you need to get in here.
I might know something about mushrooms.
Craig knows about
No,
mushrooms.
no, the ones for the tank.
Greg.
When I put my hand into a reef tank and my wrist comes up against some mushrooms and I end up with a real
Welts.
rash
Yep.
and burning sensations.
Why?
Those particular mushrooms, I don't want in any seahorse
What
tank.
kind of mushroom do you have? Do you know what kind of mushrooms you have?
I have no idea. I don't have them
Plenty
anymore.
trouble.
I don't have
Okay.
the reef tanks anymore.
So discoma or discosoma mushroom, which are the general ones most people wind up with, or the one that most people consider invasive, are probably fine. Now Recordia, which is a completely different species, but again a mushroom, which looks more like it's bumpy, like just constant bumps, right? They
I
can
wouldn't
be
put a
stinging.
Recordia in there.
No, I wouldn't do that. And the other one to watch out for is Redactus,
Yes.
which is extremely stingy. I know for a fact because I watched one actually wipe out pallies. Had no issues doing it either.
I'm wondering
So,
if that's
pallies-
not what's stinging me in my reef tank. I always thought it was
Could be.
hydroids. Wow. Okay, go ahead.
No, and those are your three main species, and I have all three. So it's kind of funny that you said about getting the welts, and it was the Redactus that got me. I've been stung by Euphilia LPS corals, like it was hammers that got me. I put my hand in, and was doing something, I could feel it touching me. Never thought anything of it. It took the living crap out of me.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Nobody believed me. I have Pavona, which is an SPS, completely off the subject, but nobody believed me that they had these huge sweepers that would.
Oh yeah,
It depends on how mad they get.
yeah.
Eh,
Coral warfare is, and that's what you guys are talking about, and that's the whole thing. Is and
Coral warfare is a real thing. I
it's a
have
real
seen
thing.
it.
Yeah. So you'll especially see it when it comes with. Usually you'll get two SPS of some sort, like you'll get two Monteporas that are coming together, or a Montepora and a chalice, and then you'll see it really come on. That's when you'll just see it like vicious, and they usually end up killing each other because they're throwing their sweepers at each other to take over the turf of the other one, and that's when you'll see it, right? So it's kind of a difficult situation, and I think you guys are right. If you want to avoid it, don't put them in there.
right.
Well,
It's
the
that simple.
problem with corals, and I know this personally, because at one point in time I had what was sold to me as zoanthid, and it had been in the tank. And, well, they are safe, even according to Kevin. However, one time after almost a year and a half, I saw one of my the seahorses drag its tail over that zoo and suddenly hit the substrate with convulsions.
Oh my God.
Well, as I was trying to figure out how I was going to remove the thing, another seahorse was heading in the same direction. And I went to move the seahorse away to protect it. By the way, the one that hit the substrate did get up and swim off, but it took a little while. Well, that zoo nailed me. And I spent the next 45 minutes on the couch with my arm, it got me on the finger, packed in ice packs because my arm felt like it was on fire.
Oh my God.
Aw.
Yep.
Okay, well, the 8 can has been removed.
Woo!
Craig, the green hairy mushroom, what type is that?
That's the other one I was going to warn you about. And
Yeah, hairy
yes,
mushrooms are no.
they're bad news because if they try to hitch to it, it'll immediately go into warfare mode. It'll think it's being attacked. Right?
Okay,
It'll
well,
do the,
it's teeny tiny right now, like no bigger than my pinky nail.
right. So it's
Um,
probably safe now, but it may be time to start planning to move it just because. Right.
So
You know
if
that
I
big
were
patch
to put Zoas in there, I need to make sure that it's just Zoanthus, not any.
No, I don't
anything
think. I
else.
think Cheryl might have had a rare moment. I've never been stung by a Zoa. That's me, and I've handled.
No, I mean the mushroom is actually attached to the Zoa rock.
That
that
you'll
I
probably have
put
to
in
remove
there.
the whole thing. Yeah, it's going to be too
Yeah.
difficult to split it up. Yeah.
All right, well, I'll do that tomorrow. I'm not sticking my hand in that cold ass
Yeah.
tank.
Hey,
No
Tina.
rush.
Tina.
Yeah.
The one thing,
Yeah.
the one thing that I want to say, and I hope other people see this if I have to re-edit it or not. If people get their seahorses in, they plan these tanks and they want to make them perfect and they want to make them pretty, of course, but then they get their seahorses in, and all of a sudden the seahorses capture their magic. The magic of the seahorse captures them, and it's not as important what's around them. And so making sure that the tank is clear for seahorses, is really. If it were me, I would do it as much as I could to make sure the tank is seahorse safe. And then you're gonna fall in love with the seahorses, and you're gonna be all about, look at my seahorses, and they're so pretty by themselves. They don't need the stuff on the sides.
Okay, but the Gorgonians and everything that I put in there are supposed to itch.
The Gorgonians are fine. They're fine.
Okay.
I'm just saying coral.
Well, see, now,
Okay.
let me give you an example.
Well, I thought I would put some coral on the rocks or whatever that they wouldn't be getting near, but I guess maybe I should just pull them out.
Well, the thing is with coral is it's like the one that stung me. It had been in there for a long time. It had never been a problem child, but somewhere along the lines, it got mad.
Okay.
So I mean, you could be fine for a long time. It's just,
No, I'd rather not take any. I don't want to take any chances with my seahorses. I mean, I just.
Well, I'll tell you. I'm going to tell you a little story. I was watching one of my 8-month-olds, and it was hitched directly under the overflow box. And all of a sudden, I saw it snicking something on the bottom of the box. Well, what it did is it proceeded to pop every single air bubble.
I saw that post. I thought that was cute.
And somebody else posted and said, "I've got 2 males that do the same thing."
I think that's too cute. I've got one fish that does that goes up to the top of the tank and just sits there and pops the bubbles. I'm just like, seriously, you ain't got nothing better to do?
they have amazing personalities.
Yes, they do.
They have very charming personalities, and they're always going to show you new things. So that's something. I don't keep any corals in my seahorse tanks because after that one zoo, that was enough for me to decide no, it's not
Okay.
even. And that goes.
Okay. All right, I will definitely take it out then.
And
I will stick to macro algae, I guess.
the other
If
thing,
I can find any macros right now except for Callirpa and Chato, and I don't want neither one of that crap in my tank.
Well, the thing is, you can go with Nephthia.
Nephthia Palau's fine, is it? The leather?
Nep-
Nice. You'll like that, by the way, Tina. That's like a neon, not toxic green leather.
Yeah.
I have some I could send you if you'd like. But
Seriously.
yeah, no problem.
You can go with sponges, leathers,
Yep.
gorgs, things like that. I would stay away from anything that has the palytoxin after what I went through.
Okay. All right. Well, then that does it. I'm taking it out.
I love you, Tina.
I'll
You're
take
so
it.
awesome. You're so helpful. And
Well, I want what's best for my seahorses. I mean,
absolutely, absolutely. And that is really truly the point, is that things can go well for a while, but eventually they can add up. And as Cheryl pointed out in the beginning, she has a 6-month quarantine on anything that goes into her tank. So your risk tolerance level matters. You know, she might have things that she can keep for 6 months and then put into her tank. That's different. Um, you know, with my gorgonians, I've had them for so long. I know that there's nothing on them. In fact, I have a gorgonian that I absolutely love in my reef tank from a friend Lorenzo that has hydroids all over the base. And I love that gorgonian. It's beautiful in my reef tank. It'll
And a
never what?
nightmare horse tank.
It'll never touch my seahorse tank, unfortunately. Even a branch, even anything. I won't chance it personally because my risk tolerance level is so low that I won't do it. But it's so beautiful and it sucks. But yeah, I mean, when you put something in a tank and watch it for a while in quarantine, then you can tell if it's going to be a problem. So,
okay. I don't have the option of quarantining any of my corals right now. I do for fish, but I don't have any way of quarantining my corals.
well, then in that case,
Mhm.
you know, if you're wanting to be sure about the seahorses, just yeah, I would take Cheryl's advice and stay away from anything poly, anything zoe, anything. You know, stick with what you got. Add some pretty
Okay, but
coral.
leathers and sponges and gorgonians and then macros are probably okay then.
Yeah, probably one of your best gorgs is the corky finger. Or
The
you can,
what?
they're called corky fingers.
Okay.
They're fairly thick stalks, and the beauty of them is they don't shed like a lot of gorgs will. What happens with them is when the seahorses continue to itch or hitch to them, you start seeing flesh erosion, and these are tough enough that they withstand the seahorses hitching much better.
Okay.
Because
I'll have to write-
that's the other thing people forget is it's not just that we're trying to protect seahorses. It's that the coral will get
Yeah.
hurt by the seahorse constantly hitching on it. You know, I mean constantly. So anyhow, I
I
agree.
don't put corals in for appearance in the seahorse tank. I have, yeah, leather
I do it to help keep nitrates and that down.
trees that I use just for hitching because on my regular, on the artificial hitching that I have, like artificial corals, algae will grow on that and I got to clean them. But with the Kenya tree or the Kenya tree and the leather hand coral, um, they survive the cold temperatures. They survive the hitching of the seahorses, and so that makes it a much easier thing to use for hitching for me. And now, mind you, they're just a beigey color. There's no real appeal to them, no nice coloration, but it just makes it that I can keep less artificial hitches in the tank and therefore less cleaning.
Okay. So what a devil's hand, I think is called, a devil's hand finger leather, would that be okay?
That's what I have devil's hand and Kenya, and they both
Okay.
propagate like hell.
Yeah, yeah. Kenya tree came out of my reef tank. That sucker was propagating too well.
Told you. I told you.
I'm still plucking shit, Craig. Thanks.
I told you.
I thought I got the last one and I spied one the other day. I says, oh no, you don't. Got in there with a pair of tweezers and plucked that sucker. I'm
Yeah,
like,
problem
nope.
is it'll always be there. You'll never get it all out. Someday you might, but yeah, Kenya tree is just way too good at propagation. So just saying.
Oh goodness.
I've got pulsing Xenia in there too, but it has nothing to do with hitching. It's just something.
Okay.
Pulsing is
Now,
Xenia,
see,
and it
I
hasn't.
love movement in my tank. I
Pardon me?
have pulsing xenia. I said I love movement in my tank. I have pulsing xenia in my reef tank, and so it might do good in the other one as well. Who knows?
It's a
I
But
weed.
it's not poisonous. It's not poisonous to the seahorses.
No,
It's excellent removing nutrients also.
Yep.
Xenia, I mean,
Good.
I don't use it as part of their filtration system.
Okay.
I think you're worried about when they shed or whatever, Tina. And as long as you're doing your normal routines anyway, that gets taken care of. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you'd have to have an awful lot of it for it to be a real problem.
Yeah. Well, I keep it on its own little rock, and it's gonna stay put.
I,
folks, I'm gonna sign off now. We gotta take the dog out again.
thank you, Ray, for
Right.
coming. Whoops, sorry.
Hopefully
What
I'll be
about-
back next Wednesday again.
What about green star polyps?
Oh, they're fine. Yeah, they'd be fine.
Ray,
Okay.
thank you for coming. Actually, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sign off the live stream. The thing is, if you want to be part of the Cool Kid Club, you got to subscribe and join. Just kidding. But we'll be back next Wednesday and we're going to continue this chat offline. So thank you very much for joining us. Happy Wine
Thanks, Paul.
Wednesday. If anyone wants to say Happy Wednesday, go ahead.
No.
Happy Wednesday.
Later, taters.
All right, then. Cheers, everyone. We'll get better at this as we go. Cheers. Maybe.
Cheers. I'm drinking water.
Drinking coffee. I'm actually starting to feel a little better. Oh.